The world of Magic is becoming so fast these days that most games of Commander pretty much have to follow a certain pattern. Gone are the days where you can rely on one land a turn until you hit maybe 5 or 6 lands, and you coast off of your battle cruiser style. EDH is becoming a pretty fast format from where it was a couple years ago, that turns 2 and 3 are becoming very important. You need to be careful on how you ramp and to make sure that you can consistently ramp early. When I first started playing Magic the Gathering, green seemed so powerful to me as it could get you extra lands, which helped me play my 8 drops. And as a new player, I wanted to play the biggest, flashiest spells possible that I thought were so cool. Green allowed you to play faster, rather than playing 8 lands, 1 per turn, and waiting to cast your big cool spells. But in today's game, playing a turn 3 ramp spell can slow you down so much that you need to spend your turn 4 and 5 not doing a whole lot. That is why I wanted to take a closer look at cards like Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, and tell you why I have started to cut them from my EDH decks. Hello and welcome back if you're a returning viewer, and welcome to the channel if you're new here. I'm your host and your friendly blue mage, Azrain. Thank you for joining me today, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like what I'm trying to do here. You can also go find me on Twitch if you feel like it, where I try and stream Magic the Gathering at least once, usually twice a week. You can subscribe here on the YouTube, leave a comment, head over to Twitch, leave a chat, and you can also find me on Moxfield at the name that you see here on YouTube at Azrain, where you can see my decks, and I am going to start doing some decks that I just like theory crafting and deck building, rather than just sticking with the decks that I own. I'll definitely make sure to leave a section where it's my real physical decks, and then decks that I just like building, or even viewer submitted decks. I know that I have people in my Discord that like to share their decks all the time. So if that's something that interests you, if you want to build a smaller Magic community that's just focused on having fun, talking to other real people, setting up spell table games, and even joining me on stream, go ahead and join my Discord. You can find the link to that in the bio of my YouTube or any of the descriptions on my YouTube videos. It truly does help a lot, and I love reading and responding to all of the comments in the chats that you guys leave. So if you want to get more in touch with me and others like me, just make sure to join my Discord in the description below. But back to the reason why you may have clicked on this video. I have started to cut cards such as Kodama's Reach and Cultivate from my Commander decks. You may be asking yourself, well, what about Skyshroud Claim? And don't worry, you Skyshroud Claim lovers. It's going to get its own video here in the future, but I wanted to start this new series that left me thinking after I had gone through an intense round of deck building with most of my decks, and I was noticing cards that always seemed to be the first to come out of my decks. The first thought that came to my mind was, why do I cut these cards, Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, when in the past these are some of the most essential cards in my green decks? So let's take a look at both Cultivate and Kodama's Reach and what they do in terms of the card to get a better understanding of why I've started to remove them from my Commander decks. To quickly address something that some of you may be thinking about already is Archaeomancer's Map, or the white Cultivate. Archaeomancer's Map is in white, and it allows us to play extra lands once our opponents start playing extra lands themselves. And it's an artifact, so it can be tutored, cheated into play, and reanimated more easily than something like Cultivate or Kodama's Reach. White, or the colors paired with white, also need all the help they can get, whereas green has tons of different and amazing ramp options already. Something I've started to notice in my games when I'm streaming on Spell Table or slinging spells at a friend's house is that turn 3 is super important to your game. Usually you do nothing on turn 1 unless you get that amazing turn 1 Soul Ring, and on turn 2 you should be ramping in my opinion, and whether that's with artifacts like the Signet Cycle, or personally my favorite, the Talismans, or the amazing spells such as Farseek, Nature's Lore, and 3 Visits if you so happen to find yourself in green. There are also even a few 1-mana spells that allow you to get lands from your library into your hand, which isn't the same as ramp, but it does allow us to make sure that we will have lands later in the game. Some of those cards are Bushwhack and Dig Up, alongside the mana dorks of Birds of Paradise and the Delighted Halfling, and any of those other 1-mana green producing elves that you like. But I wanted to talk about birds and the Delighted Halfling because they can produce mana of any color. I will say for the record, cards like Harrow, Springbloom Druid, and Roiling Regrowth get a pass in this section in my book, for now at least, because they allow us to do a few things that Cultivate and Kodama's Reach don't. They allow us to sacrifice other lands to either go up in lands or they get specific, non-basic lands out. And most decks come with ways to play things from our graveyard. If I'm playing a Muldrotha or a Lord Windgrace deck, I want to play a card like Harrow because I get a free land sacrifice. I can look for 2 more lands and then play that land from my graveyard later. Something I can't do with Cultivate or Kodama's Reach. It just feels bad, honestly, to search for 1 basic to the field and it's tapped, and 1 basic to my hand, when the 3 cards I just mentioned put them both on the battlefield. If I'm going to play a land ramp spell, I want it to be cheap. I want the lands to hit the field, preferably untapped, and I want to grab lands with multiple land types, like Shocklands or the Tri-lands. Getting basics is fine when you're worried about budget, but the stronger that my commander decks get, the better lands that I have, and the better my ramp needs to be. Even when I'm playing a more casual deck, I notice that if I spend turn 3 and 4 ramping, I'm still not really doing anything while my friends are casting their commanders or bigger spells. I think we need to talk about extra land cards like Explore or Growth Spiral, but that will be for another video. If I can ramp on turn 2, and then spend my turn 3 and 4 doing bigger, more impactful things, I'm going to be set up for later in the game earlier, so I can enjoy those long, late game turns, rather than just sit there with a few extra lands out and passing while I watch everyone else have fun. Some additional cards that I would suggest running instead of Cultivate and Kodama's Reach. First one we're going to talk about is Ramunap Excavator. To combo with land sacrificing in those graveyard decks that I mentioned earlier, the higher power level, or the more colors your decks are, you will probably be playing more fetch lands. And to hit all of your colors, Ramunap Excavator will help you replay those fetch lands and continue to ramp to the colors that you need. Azusa Lost but Seeking. Azusa has always been a staple in green decks. She doesn't just allow you to play an additional land, but 2 additional lands. So if you can play from your graveyard, or you're just absolutely flooded on lands, you can play 3 lands in 1 turn with this mono green staple. I'm not the biggest fan of Azusa, because she doesn't really do anything else, but getting out 3 lands in 1 turn early can help you get a lead, and playing 3 lands late can help you have enough mana to close the game and to cast your ending sequence. Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Again, allows an additional land play each turn, and lands we control are every basic land type. I've seen this trigger Valakut so many times, and when your deck increases in colors, it's nice to have a chromatic lantern that lets you play extra lands. Tireless Provisioner and Tireless Tracker. These cards are nuts because if you're in green, you're going to be ramping and playing extra lands naturally. And these cards turn your lands into more mana by letting you create treasures, or making sure you stay alive with your extra lands and giving you food tokens, or card draw by creating clues. These 2 cards cover all of your basics for staying alive and actually playing Magic the Gathering, and all they have to do is see lands hit the field. Nissa Resurgent Animist. Nissa is a newer card with a few triggers. The first land will act as a Lotus Cobra and give us a mana of any color. The second land will reveal until we hit an elf or elemental and put it into our hand. So we're getting 2 mana for the first land, and then pseudo card drawing once we get a second. Wayward Swordtooth is probably my least favorite spell from this list. It gives you an extra land per turn and is a 5/5 for 3 mana, but we need 10 permanents out for it to do anything else, so it's pretty low. Titania Voice of Gaia. Some life gain is never bad, especially with some sweet fetch lands in your deck, and we can combine this card and meld it into its powerful elemental avatar side. Wood Elves. I'm just a huge Wood Elves stan. It brings a body in and an untapped land. What's not to love about this card? This is one of my first Magic cards that I fell in love with, and I felt like it really boosted the power level of my early decks, and it will always hold a place in my heart, so I have to mention it here. Entish Restoration. Just another one of those sacrifice a land, get lands out that I forgot to mention earlier, but it also allows us to get 3 basic lands if we have a creature with power 4 or greater. Realms Uncharted. Super busted card for a lands matter deck. We search for 4 lands with different names, so we go and get the 4 best lands in our deck, and an opponent chooses 2 to go into our graveyard, and then we get to keep the other 2 in our hand. Anytime I've seen this card played, the person playing it will usually have a plan to get all 4 lands out onto the battlefield anyway, so it doesn't really matter what you make them discard. So in summary, I think that in today's game, you really need to focus on 2 mana ramp, whether that's artifacts or the spells I mentioned before. Turn 3 isn't a great place to ramp unless you can combo your ramp spell with a strategy like playing lands from your graveyard, or you have some sacrifice triggers. Cultivate and Kodama's Reach are just too slow for me in my decks. I always notice that I feel better about tutoring out one of my shock lands a turn early with the option of having it enter untapped rather than waiting an extra turn and getting a basic land tapped and 1 to my hand. I think that's going to do it for this video. Thank you for joining me today, and make sure to leave a comment down below if you agree or disagree with my option to remove Cultivate and Kodama's Reach from my green decks. What other ramp cards have you cut from your decks, and what ramp cards have you been adding in their place? As always, I'm your host and your friendly blue mage, Azarain. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.